Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of The Deliberate Zoomer, hosted by myself, Silas Maynor, and my good friend, Michael Simonton. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Who?
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Deliberate, Living Your 20s with Intention, where we discuss how to make the most of your 20s and set yourself on a trajectory for the rest of your life. I'm here again with Michael Simonton, my good friend from Praxis. So today we are talking about choosing who you surround yourself with, right? Everybody has friends. I hope you do. If you don't have friends, you should get on that. But everybody has friends, and our friends, the people we hang out with, influence us significantly. So we want to make sure that those friends and those people that we are around are helping us towards what we want. I guess why don't you just take the lead here and get a couple thoughts out so we can get this conversation rolling and see how the direction goes.
Of course. Yeah, no, when it comes to friends, when it comes to, their influences on you, my mind always goes back to this one, that one cliche saying that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so that, and then the other one, which is show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Now, those two different sayings combined into one can create a very powerful perspective on friends and community and your relationships, because you realize that they have such a powerful influence on you, and you might not even realize it. Like their habits, their traits, their personalities, they will rub off. So if you don't, if you want to be a good person, if you don't want to be a bad person, maybe don't hang out with bad people. Like basically, like as simple as that. But they impact you so much. For instance, like in my own anecdotal experience, when I was working in the service industry a lot, I'm not one for partying too much and like going out drinking all the time. But because that's what we did, I was out every night at the bar after work and just hanging out and having a good time. It was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie, but almost every night without fail, as I was sitting there having a beer, 3 or 4, with my buddies, I would sit there and I'd have that little voice in the back of my head being like, this is who you're becoming. This is what you're going to become. This is who you're going to be. These people you're going to be the average of them. And that little voice, that really helped me to get out of that, because I was like, I looked around, I realized that that's not the future that I wanted for myself. I didn't want to be the average of these 5 people, because my own humble opinion, we'd all be very subpar. So, strive to surround yourself with like high quality people, and you would be surprised at the drastic changes that will have in your day-to-day life and who you become.
Yeah, it's so vital, because we pick up most of what we learn and decide to do subconsciously, right? It's not necessarily through active. I mean, I don't know the exact, if there's a percentage at all, but most of what we learn and do in our choices are based off of subconscious activities, things that were instilled in us as a child or that we've developed over the years. And the people you hang out with are really going to dictate your life's kind of, the natural trajectory of your life, if you will. And I think this is why it's very, very important, for those people who've decided to go to college. You have to be careful, because we all know that there's so many people who go to college for the party life. They go there because it's an experience and it's the best years of their life, and they want to party it up. So if you want that, if you want your whole life to be a party, great, good for you. Have fun while it lasts, because it won't last long. And I guess honestly, that's completely. I wouldn't do that. Just you want to surround yourself with these people, right? So for example, if you are the person who did decide to go to college, find that group of people who are serious about making the most of their experience. Hang out with them a lot and try to spend time with them. Hang out with people outside of that circle as well to gain more perspectives. That's another whole point of this choosing who you hang out with, right? Obviously, when you hang out with and spend time with people with the same perspectives, you're not going to be challenged, right? You're not going to be challenged to think in a different way, to grow. This growth mindset is not going to be existing. So you need to choose those friends wisely. And I don't know if you've had experience with this. I definitely have in the past, where I had never really had a group of, of male friends to hang out with growing up. Like, I had my cousins and everything. They didn't really have choice over that. I just saw them. But when I had gained this group of people that was relatively similar in age, right? We all should be in the same point of life. I eventually realized, after months of hanging out with them, it was a great time. Like you said, partying, awesome times, right? Fun times, fun memories. But I realized that they're not helping me like get towards where I want to go. In fact, they're slowing me down to a large extent, just because in order to fit in with them, which is a huge like, as a human, we all want to fit in. I had to not be myself to fit in with them. So it's very, very vital there. What are some of your thoughts on, helping people to break those? I think that's where I was going to go originally, is to break out of the habit of those people, right? So it's very difficult, obviously, if you're good friends with them and you care about them. But what do you do, and what are some advice that you offer to people listening to change that friend group and to move on?
Absolutely. I think this, for starters, it would be to create distance between you and that previous friend group. The aforementioned, the ones that's not good for you. So, create distance. That can look like a lot of things, but primarily in this context, you're going to want to reference everything we've spoken before in these episodes. You're going to want to be honest with them. You want to make sure that that they know that you're doing this not because it's anything against them, that you still love them. They're great people, but it doesn't align with your goals and where you want to go with life. You want to be sure that you tie all these things together and you package it with a bow on top, because let's face it, these are your friends. Now, realize that if these are drinking buddies, if these are people that you just hang out with every now and then, or like a couple times a week and you go grab drinks with, all you have to do to end that relationship is really just say no to a few drinks, because how those circles work is you're not there, they find someone else. It's not really that, like, it's not that special of a bond. But speaking from past experience, when it comes to friends that you've known your whole life, and you find that they don't they don't help you become a better person, they don't feed in with your goals, they kind of detract from them, those relationships can be harder to sever. And I had some experience with that. I didn't handle it with the best tact at the time, but growing up, there's a group of us, we were four guys, we'd always hang out, we'd always do everything together. And then I think it was like 18, 19, we were hanging out, at least like a couple of, like, once or twice a week, grabbing a bunch of drinks at one of their houses and playing video games and just being delinquents. And I realized that, as much fun as it was, this isn't where I wanted to go with my life. So really how I handled that situation at the time was I sat down with one of them and I was like, hey man, I love you guys. You know that, like, I'd always be here in a heartbeat. Like, it's so much fun. It's like, but right now, with where I'm at in life, like, it doesn't really fit in with my goals, and I'm finding it really hard to do this and go after what I'm wanting to do. So, like, you're probably not going to see me around too much in the next couple months, just because, like, stuff's going to get busy. And then I had that conversation with him. It was kind of rough. I didn't handle it with as much tact as I would have liked, but at the end, I mean, we're still like bros and everything. I still hang out. I live with one of his brother. Like, we're still close, but it's like, I let him know that it wasn't good for me at the time. We can still hang out and stuff. And every time I see him, it's always a good time, but he's not one of the 5 people I spend the most time with anymore. And it was rough. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't fun, but we're both better off for it. And once you create that distance too, especially with scenarios like that, it causes those people, if they are anywhere near decent human beings, to take a pause and to look at, maybe if it's not good for you, it might not also be good for me. And that might help them break any sort of loop that they're in too. So I think it's something everyone should do with those relationships that aren't beneficial for them. And you'd be surprised at actually how much help you can cause by doing it.
Yeah, I think that for me personally, and I feel that a lot of people probably have the same issue, is you, especially the people you grew up with and you really like, siblings, for example, right? Or people that you just can't cut out of your life, like unless you're a heartless son of a bitch, right? Like you just can't get rid of them, which is, you shouldn't necessarily get rid of them. Like I don't want anybody to have this mentality of just like, people have feelings, okay? But remember that if you really want to help them, because most of the time the thing is you want to help them, you cannot give what you do not have. So if you want to help them to be a better person, you need to, for the majority of your time, be spending time with people who are getting you to the next level. And if you're still interacting with them on a certain level, it will influence them positively, right? Indirectly, whether you have conversations directly about it or not, your presence and your attitude, everything is going to be influencing them positively. I think it's really important, just kind of the idea behind this, the people you hang out with is with the subconscious learning, right? That can apply to so many things, right? It applies to the books you read. It applies to the music you listen to. These things will influence who you become. So take stock and, audit these things occasionally, saying, is this helpful? Is this really what I want, right? Do I have an issue with this? Like, do I want to be this way? And another way that I've found with people who are part of your life and there's no way to get rid of them, is to just start filling your life with other activities, right? Because you only have so much time in a day. So start putting other things in front of you to handle, right? Whether it's you want to start blogging, you want to start running, exercising, making a podcast, whatever it is, fill your time with those positive things so that you can still maintain that relationship to some extent, but also realize that it's super important that you continue to grow in the right ways. What are some thoughts you have about, I guess, exercises that people might do to help audit whether or not these people are good, right? Do you have any kind of suggestions there?
Absolutely. First thing, back to what we said earlier about breaking that loop. You got to detach. Like you have to detach. We get these are your friends. We get there's emotions there. Like you've known these people for so long. You have to be able to take that step back and take a hard analytical look at it. If pros and cons lists work for you, then that's great. But I think one of the best things you could do is sit down with a pen and paper by yourself and just sit alone in your thoughts and write down that list. Create those people that you have the most contact with and figure out how they align with your goals and what you're hoping to get out of life, and make a list of like whether or not they take and do this all from a very analytical perspective. And I say that not to sound like a heartless bastard, but because that's the only way you're going to make a good call. If you're sitting there drowning in your emotions, like, oh yes, but I've known them for so long, we've been through so much, we're such good friends. It's like, yeah, maybe you are, maybe your relationship there is solid, but does that mean you are actually good for each other and helping each other out? And the same can be said for relationships. So, like intimate relationships. And so, that's one idea that I have. I definitely would suggest doing that. I am a fan of pros and cons lists when it comes to situations like this, because it forces me to think analytically, which is imperative. But let's hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, so I guess just in general with the auditing, I remember, again, we kind of chatted about this before the podcast started, but with Praxis, when I did the Praxis program, we one of the exercises they had us do was make a list of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And decide, I guess, I can't remember if they said decide if they're helping you or relate how they're helping you achieve your goals, right? The goals that we had set out at the beginning of the program. And in total reality, I think 3 or it was either 2 or 3 of the 5 people that I hung out with the most really were not, they were positive. I was able as a salesperson to come up with reasons why they were good for me. But because I was honest with myself throughout the exercise, I pointed out to myself a few things. I was like, you know what? These are really not good. These people have an impact on me beyond these other things that I'm looking at right now, which is negative for me. And if I truly care about my well-being, my mental health, all of these things, I'm going to kind of cut them out of my life and choose to avoid that. And obviously, you know, again, it sounds so heartless because people, you know, if you're talking from this standpoint, you're treating people like a number or like just something that's a benefit to you or not, right? And what I'll say to people who would object in that manner is ultimately happiness matters. Like living a peaceful and happy life is so important. And if you value that at all, you obviously have listened to the podcast this far. You know, we've talked about choosing and realizing that you have responsibility. We've talked about choosing your goals. All of these things are not done out of selfishness. They're done out of pursuit of happiness, essentially, right? We're trying to get to a state of life that we're happy, right? We want our 20s to help us get on a nice track that we have everything, you know, relatively in place for the rest of our life. And it's definitely, you know, it's not worth holding on to those broken relationships because it's going to drag you down. And if it drags you down, it's going to drag the people around you down as well. So if you're somebody who wants to have a family, you know, realize that those negative things that are going to develop in your character right now, they're going to affect your kids. They're going to affect your relationship with your spouse in the future. So many things. Like it's not worth it. So really be honest with yourself. Do an audit of who you're hanging out with. You know, I think a lot of people come out of college or high school. I don't know exactly because I was homeschooled and didn't go to college. So, but they have this tribe, as Meg Jay calls it in her book, this tribe of people that they stick with, and they feel like they have to. You know, they feel like they have to stick around. And I see it happening to some of my friends right now. They're all hanging out all the time, and some of them have kind of branched off to make their own group of people who are motivated. But the rest of them, you know, they've, as you mentioned before, actually that's a good point with the drinking buddies, right? Once some of them started to leave the group, others naturally fell into that space, and they obviously are still all in the group, but they've essentially gotten to a point where it's, you know, it's a different core group, and then there's the people who have slightly different goals. So pros and cons can be definitely helpful. I guess I'll toss it back over to you to see what your thoughts are right now on this point.
Yeah, well, another thing that should be pointed out is if you're dealing with adults, we get it. Life happens, bro. So like if you just stop showing up and you're like, hey, like, you know, you started a new job and you're like, hey, no, work's picking up, can't hang out that much. People get it. They might give you some crap for it, be like, oh, you know, Mikey's bitching out or something like that. But that's how it goes. That's life. You're like, listen, and you don't even, in those situations, you don't even need to explain. You don't even need to be like, listen, like, you guys aren't good for me. You can just be like, just stop showing up. Or just, and like, get out of it because you're prioritizing other things. So that could be health and fitness and be like, hey, we're going out for drinks. Be like, oh, sorry, bro, just getting ready to hit the gym. Easiest way to avoid a situation like that. And you're working towards the other goals. You're still doing things like you mentioned with the blogging earlier. Another thought is like, you can't save a drowning man. I mean, you can, but how do lifeguards approach them? How do you go to save a drowning man? Well, for starters, they go feet first. And that's because instinctually when people are drowning, they're more inclined to drown you too. So they approach them feet first. That way they can kick off and swim away if that person starts trying to drown them to save themselves. And so you need to take that approach with some of these relationships and some of these people, is that like, back to lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. Sometimes the best thing you can do is give them distance, let them hit rock bottom, and then be there to pick them back up. And that's rough to say. That's rough to watch people go through. But you can't always do that. Also, being constantly available when you know that you, let's say, add more value or more valuable, like with your time and stuff like that, isn't good. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them necessarily, because you cheapen yourself, you lessen your self-worth, and they're not getting any benefits out of it. They're just kind of bringing you down with them. So like remember that too. Like if you're generally a really great solid person, and then like you go out and you're drinking with some buddies and they're always trying to like just do delinquent stuff, it's not good for you, but it's also like not good for them, and you can find much like more valuable ways to spend your time and help them at the same time, by just being absent, honestly, and then picking them back up, like speaking some truth into their lives, I guess, when they're hungover the next day and they're kind of like, hey, where'd you go? You're like, well, didn't want to end up like you right now. So I went and did the X, Y, and Z, and you want to go for a run? Like, you bring them in, and then that's if you want to save some of these friendships, which is really hard to do, but totally doable if you want to put the work in. The best way to do it, get them involved in healthy activities. Get them involved with something where you two can both still have a good time, but that is good for both of you. So like if it's, I keep going back to like bro stuff, but you know, if you go play paintball, you can go for a run, you can go do water sports, hike a mountain, stuff like that, but you can still hang out with them. But by changing the environment, you'd be surprised how drastically their characteristics will change too. And you might like even be able to really help them get their lives together.
Yeah, I think it's a good kind of place to put that. I think it's it's tough again, but I think that some of that advice is very helpful as far as helping to try to save them. Is, you know, if you really care about them, then and you want to try to save them, remember, first of all, it is not your responsibility, right? Even no matter how much you want it to be, it's not your responsibility in those cases. But if you want to, that's some of the best way. One thing I also feel like should go into this episode, because I don't think either of us really have the authority to speak on it for an entire episode, is in the book, again, you definitely got to read it, bro. In the book, The Defining Decade by Meg J, she talks about people choosing their spouse, right? So the family of their spouse, right? So this is something that was interesting to me, was she basically pointed out that people obviously a lot of times, and this is from her professional opinion, but people oftentimes will end up with a spouse who is basically like their father or mother, depending on the gender. So what she mentions is you can't choose the family you were raised with, which we've been talking about kind of in this, right? You can't choose those people, but you can choose your family. If you're going to be getting married, you can choose a spouse that has a very strong family dynamic that offsets those negative things that you've had to. Because if you really want to get away from it, there's not going to be many people who are going to be upset at you if you decide that I want to be closer to his or her family. So you can choose your family wisely on that side of things. But no, I think. What do you have any thoughts on that? I know I don't know if we've actually discussed that topic at all in the past. Like, what are your thoughts on choosing a spouse and family there?
I would say that if you think that when you get married, you're not also marrying into a family, you're grossly mistaken. So, like, if you were going with choosing spouses and stuff like that, you want to make sure you're okay and with their family, because they're part of it and they're probably going to want them to be around. And so, you know, there's that other side of it, but in the positives, like you said, where you can basically reprogram your family structure and do better if by finding a spouse that has a much healthier family environment than you did growing up. So you can piggyback off of those positive traits and the ones that you learned from your own parents, and you can create a better family dynamic. And I think that's super important. It's really interesting. I actually had something else to say, and it was so fascinating in my mind, but I blanked on it, man.
One thing, I guess, while you're thinking of that, maybe it'll reprompt you, but I wanted to go back to, and we'll talk about it a little bit more next episode. But you had mentioned saying no, because if you say yes to everything, it devalues your worth, essentially, like your time. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a great book called Essentialism by, I think it's Greg McNow. And he talks about saying no, right? So it's so vital to, and this is what I had to learn the hard way with praxis, was this was when I started praxis, right during that boot camp, the hard time of praxis. I was hanging out with these guys that were, all the time, just like hanging out. We love to play Smash Bros, all those kind of things, right? And Smash Bros is the goat. But really, I had to learn how to say no. Like, sorry guys, I have to go. Even though they were in the same building as me, because a whole bunch of us lived together, I had to go into the next room and be like, nope, I have to work on this podcast. I'm launching this tea business, whatever. And learning to say no is such an underrated skill, but it's going to be something that this can really help with this choosing of who you're hanging out with, right? And not cheapening your time. It also goes into your coworkers, right? Everybody, you can't really, we talked about before choosing your boss. You can't often choose all of your coworkers, especially if they get hired on later. You cannot choose them. So try your best to choose when you have to be around them, to dissect their traits. Say, I like that about him. I like that about her. I don't like that. I don't like that. And then I think a really important thing, which we really haven't talked about at all, is journaling or blogging, just taking notes and getting your thoughts out, having a conversation with somebody that you trust, kind of like what we're doing, is just getting those thoughts out and formalizing it. Because if you have 4 people that you work with all the time, and between the 4 of them, they have 10 amazing traits, or there's 10 things that you really like about from the sum of them, write those down, right? Write it down and admire that and recognize it every time it happens. And when the negative things happen, you're gonna recognize them because they automatically bother you. But just actively choose to not let that become you if it bothers you. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who had this type of personality. He would work on one trait at a time, like whether it was patience or whatever it was. He just very mathematically dissected his character and added to it and subtracted to it to the best of his ability.
Yeah, I believe that was Benjamin Franklin, and the analogy he had for that was sharpening an axe, and he wanted to have the sharpest axe he could. What he came to find was that there has to be a balance and a dichotomy. So, what the benefits that one trait might have, it might also have some counter negatives. And so he came to his final conclusion, I believe, on that, because I do remember reading about it, was that a perfect sharpened axe is impossible. So choose which specs or like rust spots you would like to have. So basically, like you can't have everything in life. So make sure you do have some priorities. I did remember what I was going to say earlier though, and that's when it comes to choosing friends and like maybe separating from old ones, you have to recognize and realize that in doing so, you're going to create a void. And what gets filled with this void is just as important as what you just took out of it. So be sure, if you're cutting out friends, you still have like bad friends, you still have some good ones. You have some supplementary hobbies or activities that you can throw in there to fill your time, because you're still going to need that time to kick back and relax. You're still going to need someone to relate to. So you have to be aware of that and have a plan for filling that void. Takes away from the Benjamin Franklin comment, but yeah.
No, that makes sense, and I think that's definitely a good kind of point to end it on. Is again, if you are choosing to remove something, anything in your life, whether it's a bad habit or bad people or whatever, you're going to naturally fill it with something else. So be careful and choose deliberately and intentionally what it will be. And on that note, we will talk about it, and it'll be an episode. We'll talk about it in more detail. But when you're entering new environments, I think that is a great opportunity, specifically for people moving to college or moving away. These offer immense opportunity to think ahead and to plan and say, I have recognized throughout the past months or years that I have these traits. And now going into this new place, and I think this is relevant for a number of people who are going to be listening, because as a young person, you typically have all these opportunities presented and you move, and specifically moving to a new location, whether it's in the same city or not, offers you the opportunity to create new habits and to essentially plan those things rather than them just coming together at random, right? Specifically with your friends. For me, when I moved here to New York City, it's a little difficult and complicated because of the pandemic, but the plan that I had to make friends would have been through church, through ultimate Frisbee groups, and through board game groups, right? that's what my plan was. I wanted to be part of that rather than just being at home and be lonely, which ended up happening because of the pandemic. But regardless, like the point is I had some sort of plan in place that I was going to use. And it's important to have that to deliberately choose what's going on.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the whole reason we're here today. And for these past episodes, is to live deliberately, to set yourself up for that success and to get the most out of your life, to live your best life, as Aristotle would put it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. Well, we'll leave it there. Again, just to wrap up, the whole idea here is choosing your friends has to be part of this whole mindset, right? This whole series of podcasts, again, we're trying to help people have resources and at least thought-provoking ideas here that help them to realize you are in charge of your life. You need to figure out what you want, what's important to you, and then live your whole life in that regard, right? Get these things. It's never going to be perfect the first time. You can work through it, but your friends and who you hang out with has a significant impact on who you will become. So be very choosy and be picky about who those people are. Make sure they align with your goals that you have set. And from there, things should typically fall into place pretty well. And we'll get into some more topics in further episodes. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Next time, we will discuss in detail decisiveness, being able to say yes or no, and how that can help you in life. So see you next time. Thanks.